My name is Clara, and I am 34 years old. For the past decade, my life's work has been to create harmony in nature as a landscape architect, coaxing beauty from chaos, designing spaces where people can find peace. I've always believed that with enough care, patience, and thoughtful planning, any environment can be nurtured into a place of balance. For 7 of those years, I have been married to Leo, a man whose quiet soul is the bedrock of my own. I thought, for a long time, that the same principles of patience and gentle cultivation could be applied to his family. I was wrong. What should have been a warm, intimate celebration of my in-laws' 40th anniversary at a restaurant called the Airy became the moment the delicate ecosystem of our family finally collapsed. My sister-in-law, Isabel, had always been a challenging presence, a force of nature as unpredictable and destructive as a summer squall. But that night, she engineered a storm that altered our landscape forever. As the waiter placed a leather-bound bill folder on the table, Isabel offered a smile as bright and brittle as spun sugar and spoke the words that would bring years of unspoken tensions to the surface. Before I tell you how I responded, and about the quiet revolution that followed, I need to take you back to the soil from which this story grew. Leo and I met in the hushed aisles of a university library, a place that suited him perfectly. He was a research archivist, a guardian of stories, and I was immediately drawn to his gentle intelligence and the profound stillness he carried within him. We dated for 3 years, our love story unfolding slowly, like a fern unfurling in the shade. We married in a small, sun-dappled garden I had designed, surrounded by our closest friends. From the very beginning, I sensed a subtle dissonance in his family, a current of unease beneath their polished surface, but I had no idea how deep it ran until I became part of their story. My husband, Leo, is one of the kindest people I have ever known. He is thoughtful, methodical, and deeply dedicated to his work preserving the delicate fragments of the past. He moves through the world with a quiet consideration that I have always found beautiful. However, in the presence of his family, particularly his older sister, Isabel, he becomes a different version of himself, a faded copy, his colors muted. Years of ingrained family dynamics had taught him to absorb their demands, to smooth over their sharp edges with his own placid nature. Whenever I gently suggested he advocate for himself, that his voice deserved as much space as theirs, a shadow would cross his face, and he would change the subject. Isabel, at 37, has always been the sun around which the family system orbits. With her impeccably tailored clothes and a career in luxury brand marketing, she radiates an aura of effortless success. She married Marcus, a man who works in private equity, and they live in a glass and steel house in the city's most exclusive enclave. On the surface, their life is a glossy magazine spread. But beneath the veneer lies a troubling sense of entitlement and a mastery of emotional manipulation that she wields with surgical precision. My in-laws, Richard and Eleanor, are pillars of the community. He, a retired cardiac surgeon, still carries the air of a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. She, a former art gallery owner, maintains a home that is less a living space and more a curated exhibit. They are not unkind people, but they suffer from a peculiar form of blindness where their children are concerned. They have always basked in the reflected glory of Isabel's achievements, attending her gallery openings and award dinners, while often forgetting to even ask about Leo's latest historical preservation project. Marcus, Isabel's husband, is a quiet observer in this family theater. He nods when Isabel speaks, laughs at her jokes, even the ones that land like small, sharp stones at Leo's expense, and generally fades into the background. I've often wondered if he is truly content or simply a man who has learned that peace comes at the price of his own opinion. Over the years, I have watched Isabel take advantage of her brother's gentle nature time and time again. When she and Marcus were buying their house, she somehow convinced Leo that a $15,000 loan from our savings would be the final piece they needed to secure their dream property, a loan that was never mentioned again, let alone repaid. When their imported German car required a costly repair, she spun a tale of financial hardship that resulted in Leo quietly contributing to the bill. Each time, Leo would justify it with a sigh. It's just what family does, Clara. The problem was that the river of generosity only flowed in one direction. When Leo and I were scraping together the down payment for our modest cottage, Isabel offered only critiques of the neighborhoods we could afford. When Leo needed an unexpected root canal and was worried about the cost, a text to Isabel went unanswered for a week. The pattern was as clear to me as the design on a blueprint, but Leo seemed unable or unwilling to see it. I tried to establish boundaries, gently but firmly. When Isabel called one summer, assuming we would watch her 2 children for 10 days while they jetted off to Tuscany, I politely declined, explaining that I had a major project deadline. This small act of self-preservation resulted in a glacial silence from the entire family that lasted for months, punctuated only by a call from Eleanor expressing her disappointment that we weren't more supportive. The constant tension was a slow erosion, wearing away at the edges of our marriage. Our arguments almost always followed a family gathering, with Leo accusing me of being overly critical and me pleading with him to see the profound lack of respect he was shown. We reached a breaking point last winter when Isabel announced she had booked a lavish ski chalet for the entire family for New Year's and informed us that our share, inexplicably calculated at nearly half the total cost, was due by the end of the week. After a long, painful conversation that lasted late into the night, Leo finally, tearfully, agreed that something had to change. So, when his parents' 40th anniversary approached, we decided to make a gesture of goodwill, but on our own terms. I suggested the Airy, an elegant restaurant known for its breathtaking views and farm-to-table cuisine, upscale, but within our means if we were all mindful. Leo thought it was a perfect idea and called his parents to extend the invitation. We spent weeks preparing. I researched the menu online, made a reservation for 6, and worked with Leo to choose a thoughtful gift, a beautifully bound, custom-made album filled with photos from their 40 years together, paired with a gift certificate for a weekend at a quiet coastal inn they had once mentioned wanting to visit. Despite my deep-seated reservations, a part of me genuinely hoped this evening could be a reset, a chance to build a healthier foundation. Leo was so hopeful, so eager for a peaceful family evening, and his happiness was my North Star. I was determined to make the night special for Richard and Eleanor, to honor their milestone with grace. The area is perched atop a winding road that snakes up a hill overlooking the city of Port Blossom and the vast, shimmering expanse of the bay. The restaurant itself is a marvel of modern architecture, a structure of glass and cedar nestled into the landscape, as if it had grown there. As we pulled into the valet circle, Leo reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's going to be a good night," he said, more to convince himself than me. I squeezed back, offering a smile I hoped was reassuring. The interior was even more stunning than the photographs. Soaring ceilings, warm wood, and a wall of glass that made you feel as if you were floating above the twinkling city lights below. A hostess led us to a perfect corner table, a curved booth that offered both intimacy and an unparalleled view. "This is beautiful, Clara," Leo whispered, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. He was so relieved. Richard and Eleanor arrived precisely at 7, impeccably dressed. Eleanor wore a silk tunic in a shade of deep sapphire, and Richard a tailored blazer that spoke of quiet expense. "Happy anniversary," we said in unison, rising to hug them. "My, this place is quite something," Richard commented, his eyes sweeping the room with an appraising glance. "You two didn't have to do all this." "We wanted to," Leo said, his voice full of warmth. 40 years is incredible, Dad." Eleanor offered a tight, polite smile. "It's very nice, dear." Though Isabel had recommended that new French place downtown. She said the sommelier is world-class. I felt a familiar, tiny dip in my stomach, but kept my own smile in place. "The chef here has 2 Michelin stars. I think you'll be very impressed." A waiter appeared with menus and recited the evening specials. As we looked them over, I noticed the prices were higher than the online menu I had consulted. A new seasonal menu, I presumed. I did a quick mental calculation. It would be tight, but manageable, if everyone ordered with some degree of moderation. 20 minutes past our reservation time, Isabel and Marcus swept in. Isabel was wearing a dramatic black dress that was both understated and wildly expensive. She air-kissed everyone before sinking into the booth. "So sorry we're late," she announced, not sounding sorry at all. The traffic was a nightmare, and then finding a spot, it was impossible. "They have valet parking, Isabel," I mentioned gently. She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Marcus doesn't trust valets with the new car." Marcus offered a weak, corroborating nod, though he looked as if this particular policy was news to him. Once settled, Isabel began her assessment. "An interesting choice, Clara," she said, her gaze flicking around the room. "I heard their pastry chef just left." "The executive chef is still here," I replied, my tone even. "I did quite a bit of research." "How thoughtful of you," she said, with a smile that never reached her cool, assessing eyes. "Mom, Dad, you simply must have the lobster. I hear they fly it in from Maine daily." I glanced at the menu. The lobster was, by a significant margin, the most expensive item. Before I could suggest the equally delicious, but more reasonably priced scallops, Eleanor was nodding. "That sounds divine. Richard, shall we both get the lobster?" Richard agreed without a second thought. "Why not? It's a celebration." The waiter returned for our drink orders. "Let's start with some champagne for the table," Isabel declared. "Do you have Veuve Clicquot?" The waiter nodded. "The rose, madam?" "Of course," she said. I caught Leo's eye, a silent flicker of concern passing between us. A bottle of that champagne was not in our carefully planned budget. But before either of us could speak, Richard was raising his water glass. "To 40 wonderful years with my beautiful Eleanor," he toasted. We all clinked glasses, and I tried to breathe, to let go. Perhaps one bottle of expensive champagne was a worthy indulgence for such an occasion. My hope for moderation, however, evaporated when Isabel ordered a second bottle before the first was even finished. "Order whatever you like, everyone," Eleanor encouraged, buoyed by the champagne and the celebratory mood. "It's not every day we mark 40 years. As the ordering commenced, I watched in a state of quiet dread. Isabel selected the priciest appetizer, the most expensive cut of steak for her main, and then began suggesting additional side dishes for the table. Marcus, as usual, followed her lead. Richard and Eleanor were set on their lobsters. Leo and I chose modest pasta dishes, but I knew it would hardly make a dent in the rapidly escalating total. Between the appetizers and the main course, Isabel leaned back with a theatrical sigh of contentment. "Clara's treat tonight is just so generous. It's lovely to be pampered for a change." I nearly choked on my water. "Well, Leo and I wanted to treat you to a lovely dinner, of course, but we did hope everyone would be a bit mindful of the cost." An uncomfortable silence descended. It was Eleanor who broke it with a light, tinkling laugh. "Oh, Clara, you have such a dry sense of humor." Another toast to our generous hosts. Throughout the meal, I tried to steer the conversation back to its intended purpose, asking Richard and Eleanor about their favorite memories. "What was your wedding day like?" I asked warmly. Before they could answer, Isabel jumped in. "Oh, do you remember when I was the flower girl at Aunt Catherine's wedding? Everyone said I stole the show." "You were a natural," Eleanor agreed, launching into a story about one of Isabel's childhood dance recitals. I watched Leo shrink a little in his seat, becoming more and more transparent as the conversation swirled around his sister's endless accomplishments, with barely a mention of him. When Richard finally did mention Leo, it was to recall a story of him, as a teenager, accidentally backing the family car into a fence. "He was always a bit clumsy, that one," Richard chuckled, as if Leo wasn't sitting right there, his face a mask of forced pleasantry. I rested my hand on Leo's knee under the table, a small gesture of solidarity. My frustration was beginning to simmer. This was supposed to be about his parents, not another installment of the Isabel show. As our main courses arrived, the atmosphere grew more strained. Isabel began regaling the table with embarrassing stories from Leo's adolescence, each one seemingly handpicked to paint him as awkward and inept. "Remember the time Leo tried to impress that girl in his chemistry class by building a volcano for the science fair? It ended up erupting all over the new living room carpet." She laughed, a loud, sharp sound, as she took another sip of champagne. Richard and Eleanor joined in the laughter. I remember that. Your mother spent a week trying to get the stain out, Richard added. Leo forced a smile, but I could see the deep hurt in his eyes. That was over 20 years ago, Isabel, he said quietly. And what about his first job at the bookshop? She continued, ignoring him. He got fired after 2 weeks for reorganizing the entire fiction section by the color of the book covers. I set my fork down. Actually, Leo was just awarded a grant for the library's archival project. It's a huge honor, and it's going to preserve a significant part of the city's history. Oh, that's nice, dear, Eleanor said dismissively, before turning back to her daughter. Now, Isabel, tell us more about your trip to Milan. The photos you posted were breathtaking. Isabel launched into a long, detailed account of her luxury vacation, name-dropping designers and five-star hotels. As she spoke, she flagged down the waiter. We'll need another bottle of the Malbec, she announced, pointing to a vintage I knew was costly. And let's get the artisanal cheese platter for the table. Mom, Dad, you must try the aged Gouda. I did a quick, frantic calculation. 2 bottles of champagne, an expensive bottle of red wine, 6 appetizers, 6 main courses including 2 market-price lobsters, and now a $100 cheese platter. We were so far beyond our budget it was almost laughable. We had planned for around $800, a generous sum for 6 people. This was already pushing 3 times that. When I excused myself to use the restroom, Isabel followed me. As we stood before the large, ornate mirror, she reapplied her crimson lipstick and met my eyes in the reflection. Leo always was the sentimental type, wasn't he? She said, her voice casual. It's sweet. But it's good he married someone practical. Someone who can handle the finances. I was stunned by her audacity. Excuse me? Oh, don't be coy, Clara. It doesn't suit you. She snapped her clutch shut with a decisive click. Just make sure you leave a generous tip. The service has been impeccable. She swept out, leaving me gripping the cool marble of the vanity, my heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't just a lack of consideration anymore. This was a deliberate, calculated act of humiliation. When I returned to the table, Leo shot me a questioning look. I gave a slight shake of my head, not wanting to detonate the bomb that was building inside me during his parents' anniversary dinner. But my patience was worn down to a single, fraying thread. Throughout the rest of the meal, I watched as Isabel orchestrated the evening like a cruel conductor, encouraging her parents to order dessert, then dessert wines, then a round of expensive single malt scotch for the men. Leo and I exchanged worried glances over the rims of our water glasses. I remembered our explicit conversation when we'd extended the invitation. We'd love to treat you to dinner for your anniversary, but we do have a budget, so we'd appreciate it if everyone could be mindful. Everyone had nodded. Richard had even said, of course, son. Just having the family together is gift enough. Yet here we were. Each time the waiter approached with another bottle we hadn't ordered or another dish Isabel had suggested, my anxiety coiled tighter in my stomach. Leo looked physically ill but remained silent, trapped in a lifetime of conditioning. As we finished our coffee, I estimated the bill had to be approaching $3,000, money we had earmarked for much-needed repairs on our cottage roof. I felt sick, not just at the cost, but at the breathtaking disrespect. This wasn't a celebration that had gotten out of hand. Isabel's smug glances in my direction all evening confirmed it. This was a power play. My anger began to burn away the anxiety. I had spent 7 years trying to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I'd attended every holiday, remembered every birthday, listened patiently to Eleanor's complaints about her garden club, and helped Richard set up his new tablet. And this was our reward. To be used as a financial vehicle for their amusement, to watch my kind, gentle husband be treated as the family fool at a dinner we were hosting in his parents' honor. I took a deep, steadying breath. I would hold it together. I would pay the outrageous bill, and then Leo and I would have the most serious conversation of our marriage. But I had no inkling that the true performance was yet to come. After nearly 4 hours of dining, drinking, and simmering tension, the waiter finally approached our table. I hope everything was to your satisfaction, he said with a practiced smile. Everything was wonderful, I said, my voice tight. We're finished now. Just the check, please. Certainly, madam. He returned a moment later with a slim leather folder, which he placed discreetly on the table beside me. I reached for it, my hand surprisingly steady, bracing myself for the damage. I opened the folder. And for a moment, the entire restaurant, the glittering city lights, the low hum of conversation, it all faded to a dull roar in my ears. The total was not the $3,000 I was expecting. It wasn't even $5,000. The number at the bottom of the long, itemized receipt was $54,782.50. I blinked, certain my eyes were deceiving me. But the number remained, stark and surreal. I scanned the list of charges, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. There were multiple entries for private seller vintage selection, charges for imperial caviar service, and a line item for a Grand View private salon fee of $25,000. Clara? Is everything all right? Leo asked, his voice laced with concern as he saw the blood drain from my face. Before I could form a single word, Isabel leaned forward, her eyes wide with theatrical shock. She let out a little gasp and then, looking directly at me, she said, "Oh, Clara, you won't believe this. We seem to have left our wallets at home. Both of us. Can you imagine?" Richard and Eleanor burst into laughter, a hearty, genuine sound, as if this were the most amusing punchline they had ever heard. Marcus, on cue, gave a helpless shrug. "That's right," he mumbled. Completely slipped my mind. Left everything on the dresser. I stared at them, the bill trembling in my hand. Leo reached over, took the folder, and I watched his face pale, his eyes widening in disbelief. $54,000? He whispered. This is impossible. Is there a problem? The waiter asked, his professional smile faltering as he returned to our table. A heavy silence fell. I looked at Isabel's smug, triumphant face. At my in-laws' expectant smiles. At my husband's utter confusion and shame. And in that moment, something deep inside me, a foundation I didn't even know was there, settled into place. The years of accommodating, of absorbing, of making myself smaller to make them more comfortable, it all fell away. A wave of profound, cold clarity washed over me. "Yes," I said, my voice calm and clear, loud enough for the entire table to hear. "There is a problem. This bill is not only incorrect, but my husband and I will not be covering expenses we didn't authorize." I turned to Isabel. "You and Marcus deliberately ordered extravagantly, knowing you had no intention of contributing. Richard, Eleanor, as much as we wanted to celebrate with you, we were clear about our budget. I am happy to pay for what Leo and I consumed, plus a generous portion for your anniversary dinner as we planned. The rest will need to be settled by those who ordered it." The laughter died as if switched off. Isabel's expression morphed from smugness to shock, then to pure outrage. Richard's jaw tightened, and Eleanor placed her napkin on the table with a sharp, deliberate motion. "Clara," Eleanor said, her voice like ice. "This is hardly the time or place to be frugal. It's our anniversary. Which is precisely why we planned a lovely, respectful dinner within our means," I replied, my voice unwavering. "Not whatever this became. Are you actually refusing to pay?" Isabel demanded, her voice rising. "After everything this family has done for you?" Leo, who had been stunned into silence, finally found his voice. It was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a blade. "What exactly has the family done for us, Isabel? Please remind me." The restaurant manager, a tall man with a worried expression, was now approaching our table. "Is everything all right here this evening?" "No," I said, handing him the bill. "This bill is incorrect. We did not order most of these items, nor did we request or use a private salon." The manager took the bill, his eyebrows shooting up as he saw the total. "My sincerest apologies. Let me look into this immediately." As he hurried away, Isabel leaned across the table, her voice a venomous whisper. "You are making a scene. Just pay the bill, Clara. We can sort it out later." "There is nothing to sort out," I said firmly. "Leo and I agreed to host a celebratory anniversary dinner, not to finance a bacchanal for people who have no respect for us or our finances." "Respect?" Richard scoffed. "What does respect have to do with family? In a healthy family, It has everything to do with it, I countered, surprised by my own strength. And healthy families don't manipulate and exploit one another. The manager returned, his face pale. Ma'am, sir, there has been a catastrophic error. It seems another party's charges, including their private room fee, were mistakenly added to your bill. I am so sorry. He produced a new, corrected bill. The correct total is $7,458.22. While a world away from $54,000, it was still nearly 10 times what we had budgeted. I took a deep breath. Thank you for the correction. Now, we will require 3 separate checks, please. One for my husband and myself. One for Mr. and Mrs. Miller, Sr. And one for Isabel and Marcus Miller. Absolutely not, Isabel hissed. This dinner was your gift. A reasonable dinner was our gift, Leo said, his voice stronger now, drawing strength from the confrontation. Not a $7,000 feast. The manager looked profoundly uncomfortable but nodded. I will arrange for the checks to be split according to what each couple ordered. As he walked away, Eleanor turned to Leo, her eyes welling with tears. I cannot believe you would ruin our anniversary this way, Leo. Mom, Leo said, his voice quiet but firm. You and Dad always taught me the importance of being responsible. I'm just being responsible with my family's finances. With our finances. We expected better from you, Richard said sternly, his gaze sweeping over both of us. From both of you. And we expected to be treated with respect, I replied softly. I suppose we're all disappointed tonight. The manager returned with 3 small leather folders. Our bill was just over $850. Richard and Eleanor's was nearly $3,000. And Isabel and Marcus's was almost $3,600. There must be a mistake, Isabel said, looking at her bill in horror. No mistake, madam, the manager said. This reflects the items ordered by your party. Isabel turned to her parents, her expression panicked. Mom, Dad, can you? Richard cut her off with a sharp wave of his hand. Enough, Isabel. He pulled out his wallet and placed a platinum credit card on the table to cover their portion. Isabel and Marcus exchanged a desperate glance. We really did leave our wallets at home, Marcus stammered weakly. Then how are you planning on tipping the valet? Leo asked, his question simple and devastating. Marcus's face flushed a deep red as his hand instinctively went to his back pocket, where the clear outline of his wallet was visible through the fabric of his trousers. The lie was exposed, stark and pathetic. Isabel's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. The bills were paid in a tense, vibrating silence. We all rose to leave, the warmth and laughter of the evening's start now a distant, mocking memory. What had begun as a celebration had become a reckoning, a turning point from which there was no going back. The walk from our table to the restaurant's entrance felt miles long. Richard and Eleanor strode ahead, a wall of silent disapproval. Isabel and Marcus trailed behind them, whispering furiously to each other. Leo and I walked last, our hands tightly clasped in a silent pact of solidarity. The cool night air of Port Blossom was a welcome shock after the heated atmosphere inside, but the chill between us was far colder. As soon as we were clear of the entrance, Isabel spun around to face us, her face a mask of rage in the soft glow of the valet lights. I cannot believe you would humiliate us like that, she spat, her voice trembling. We humiliated you? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. Isabel, you orchestrated a plan to stick us with a $7,000 bill and lied about it to our faces. It was a joke, she insisted, her eyes flashing. We were going to pay our share eventually. Were you? Leo asked, his voice quiet but resonant in the still night air. Because that's not what it sounded like when you told Clara in the restroom that it was good I married someone who could handle the finances. Isabel's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, caught off guard that I had shared her private jab. She recovered quickly. You're twisting my words. I would never say that. Enough. Richard's voice was a low boom that cut through the argument. This behavior is beneath all of you. Eleanor, dabbing at her eyes with a linen handkerchief, added, 40 years of marriage and this is how it ends. Arguing in a parking lot. Mom, I'm so sorry, Leo began, his voice softening with reflexive sympathy. But Isabel cut him off. They should be the ones who are sorry. Making a scene over a little money when we were trying to celebrate you. How petty can you possibly be? It was never about the money, Isabel, I said, my voice firm. It was about respect. You spent the entire evening belittling your brother, telling embarrassing stories, and ignoring his accomplishments, all while running up a bill you never intended to pay. Oh, poor, sensitive Leo, she sneered. It was just family teasing. It's never just teasing with you, Isabel, Leo said, and his voice held a strength I had never heard him use with her before. It's always been about making yourself look bigger by making me look smaller. And I've let it happen for my entire life because I thought that's what a good son and a good brother was supposed to do. But I'm done. A heavy, stunned silence fell over the parking lot. Richard was the first to speak. Leo, you need to calm down. Think about what you're saying. This is your sister. This is your family. I know exactly who she is, Dad, Leo said, his voice breaking slightly but his gaze steady. I've always known. I just never had the courage to say it out loud before. Eleanor began to cry in earnest. I don't understand. Our beautiful anniversary ruined. It wasn't beautiful from the start, Eleanor, I said gently. It was a performance, orchestrated by Isabel to create this exact outcome. How dare you? Isabel shrieked. Mom, Dad, are you going to let her speak about me this way? Richard put a protective arm around his wife. We're going home. This has gone far enough. He turned his stern, disappointed gaze on his son. Leo, Clara, I suggest you both take some time to reflect on your priorities. Family should always come first. We agree, Leo replied, his voice clear again. Which is why we're finally prioritizing our family. The two of us. Richard's face hardened. I see. Well, when you're ready to apologize, you know where to find us. They turned and walked toward their car, Isabel and Marcus following in their wake. As they retreated, Isabel's voice, sharp and bitter, drifted back to us. I told you she was changing him. He was never like this before he met her. Leo and I stood in the quiet of the parking lot, watching them drive away. When their tail lights disappeared down the winding road, he let out a long, shuddering breath. I can't believe I just did that. I have never been more proud of you, I said, turning to face him and taking both of his hands in mine. That took incredible courage. The drive back to our little cottage was mostly silent, the air in the car thick with unspoken emotions. It wasn't until we were sitting on our sofa, still in our nice clothes, the scent of the fancy restaurant clinging to us, that the full weight of the evening settled. They're going to be furious, Leo whispered, running a hand through his hair. I've never stood up to them like that. Not ever. They've never pushed us this far before, I replied softly. Leo, what Isabel did, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was cruel. He nodded slowly. I know. I think a part of me has always known how she operates. But it was always easier to just go along with it than to face this. And your parents? I asked gently. He was quiet for a long moment. They've always enabled her. I used to think it was just because she was more outgoing, more like them. But it's more than that. They let her set the rules because it keeps the peace, even if it's a false peace. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then again. And again. A rapid-fire succession of texts from Isabel, each one a Molotov cocktail of blame and accusation. I silenced the phone and turned it face down. She's not going to let this go. No, Leo agreed. She won't. And my parents will take her side. They always do. As if on cue, Leo's phone rang. Dad flashed on the screen. He stared at it, his jaw tight, then finally answered, putting it on speaker. Leo. Richard's voice was cold and clipped. Your mother is beside herself. She hasn't stopped crying since we got home. I'm sorry to hear that, Dad, Leo replied, his voice even. Sorry, doesn't fix what you did. You and your wife embarrassed this entire family. Dad, Isabel tried to saddle us with a $7,000 dinner bill after lying to our faces. It was a misunderstanding, Richard insisted. And even if it wasn't, you handle that privately. You don't make a public spectacle. Like how Isabel handled things privately. By telling Clara in the restroom that I was a sentimental fool who couldn't handle his own finances. There was a beat of silence on the other end. She says she never said that. Leo let out a humorless laugh. Of course, she does. Dad, listen. I think we all need some space. Tonight brought a lot of things to light. And Clara and I need time to figure out what it all means. Figure out? Richard's voice rose. There's nothing to figure out. You call your mother, you apologize to your sister, and we put this behind us. Not this time, Dad, Leo said, his voice firm. Good night. He ended the call and looked at me, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I've never hung up on my father in my life. I moved closer and wrapped my arms around him, holding him as he finally let the tremors of a lifetime of suppressed feelings shake through him. It's going to be okay, I whispered into his hair. Maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. What if it's not? He asked, his voice muffled against my shoulder. What if this is it? What if they never want to see me again? Then we will build a life so full of love and respect that it will be enough, I promised him. We will be enough. The weeks that followed were a strange mix of quiet grief and profound relief. Leo and I had to learn how to live in the new, silent space that his family had once occupied. The initial days were a minefield of anxiety, with every phone call or email notification sending a jolt through us. At my suggestion, Leo found a therapist, someone to help him navigate the complex emotional terrain he was traversing. I need to understand why I let it go on for so long, he told me, and why it was so terrifying to finally say no. I watched, my heart full of love, as he began the brave work of untangling the knots of his past. We held firm on our boundary of no contact. The occasional call from a well-meaning aunt or cousin would come through, baited with Isabel's carefully constructed narrative of victimhood. Natalie called today, I told Leo one evening. Apparently, Isabel's version is that we stormed out of the restaurant and left her and your parents with the entire bill. Leo just shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. Of course. She's the author of her own reality. I think Natalie was starting to see through it, though, I added. When I calmly explained what happened, she got very quiet and just said, that sounds like Isabel. 2 months after the dinner, Leo told me he had written a letter to his parents. It wasn't an apology or an accusation, but a quiet, honest account of his life as their son, the feeling of being perpetually in Isabel's shadow, the sting of his achievements going unnoticed, the slow accumulation of hurts that had led to that night at the Airy. Are you going to send it? I asked. He nodded. I have to. I don't know how they'll react, but I need them to know my truth. 3 days after he mailed it, Richard called. The conversation was short, but it was a beginning. My dad, he listened, Leo said, a look of wonder on his face. He didn't agree with everything, but he didn't argue. He just listened. He asked if I would meet him for coffee next week. Just him and me. He paused, looking out the window. He said, I'm sorry, son. I guess I just never saw it. The coffee with his father was the first stone laid in the foundation of a new, more honest relationship. It wasn't a magical fix, but it was a start. Richard admitted that perhaps they had been too indulgent with Isabel, that they had allowed her to dominate the family narrative for the sake of peace. Isabel, predictably, was incandescent with rage when she learned of the meeting. She called Leo, she called me, and when her furious calls went unanswered, she showed up at our door one Saturday afternoon. You have ruined this family, she accused when I opened the door, her face blotchy with anger. No, Isabel, I replied, my voice calm. I was no longer afraid of her. The old version of this family was unsustainable. It was hurting people. It was hurting your brother. My parents are barely speaking to me because of you. If your parents are creating distance, it's because they are finally seeing your behavior for what it is. I stood my ground in the doorway as she tried to push past me. You're not welcome in our home, Isabel, until you are ready to take responsibility for your actions. Apologize. She let out a bitter laugh. For what? For trying to hold this family together. Goodbye, Isabel, I said, and gently closed the door. From the living room, Leo watched me, his eyes full of a quiet, profound gratitude. Thank you, he whispered when I came to sit beside him. Thank you for protecting our peace. Slowly, carefully, we began to rebuild. We started having quiet Sunday lunches with Richard and Eleanor, always on neutral ground, always with the unspoken understanding that certain topics were off-limits. The change was gradual, but it was real. One day, Leo came home from work, looking stunned. "My mom called me," he said. She said Isabel tried to guilt her into paying for a spa retreat because she was so traumatized by our family drama. And my mom said no. For the first time, she just said, "Isabel, that's not something we can do." 6 months after that fateful night at the Airy, we found ourselves at a barbecue in a sun-drenched park. It was the first time we were all together again. The air was tentative, but not hostile. I watched as Richard engaged Leo in a long conversation about his work, asking thoughtful, specific questions. I saw Eleanor gently quiet Isabel when she tried to make a cutting joke at my expense. I even saw Marcus drift away from his wife's side to talk to Leo, man to man, about a shared interest in vintage maps. Nothing was perfect. Isabel was still sullen, still radiating a sense of injustice. But the system around her had changed. The planet had stopped orbiting its volatile sun. As we packed up our things at the end of the afternoon, Eleanor came over to me. "That photo album you gave us for our anniversary," she said softly. "I look at it all the time. Richard and I have been talking a lot about the past, about the things we missed." Her eyes were filled with a genuine, sorrowful regret. "We weren't fair to Leo. We see that now. It takes a lot of courage to see things differently," I said. "No," she replied, shaking her head. "It took courage for you and Leo to show them to us." Driving home, a comfortable silence settled between us. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windshield, dappling the dashboard with light. "You know," Leo said, reaching over to take my hand, "I think today was the first time in my entire adult life that I actually enjoyed spending time with my family. Our story doesn't have a perfectly neat ending. There was no dramatic apology from Isabel, no miraculous transformation. The healing is ongoing, a continuous process of tending to the landscape of our lives, pulling the weeds of old habits and nurturing the new, healthier growth. We learned that boundaries are not walls to keep people out, but fences to protect the sacred ground within. We learned that true family isn't an obligation you endure, but a connection you cultivate, one built on the fertile soil of mutual respect. The most profound lesson for me was in watching my gentle, quiet husband find his voice. He didn't become someone else, he simply became more himself, shedding the heavy cloak of expectation he had worn for so long. And in his quiet strength, I found my own. We had faced the storm together and come out the other side, not unscathed, but changed. Our love, once a quiet garden, had proven it had roots deep enough to withstand any weather. And now, in the calm that followed, everything was finally, beautifully, in balance.